Hey guys, Tom here, Permaculture Wilmington. Just wanted to show you a little bit about what we've got going on. We tell people we have a food forest and they're curious as to what we mean. But really what's going on here with the food forest is that we use the principles of nature and what happens in a forest to reincorporate that and grow vegetables in our yard. And what this means is that we have overstory trees that provide shade in the middle of the day in the summertime when it's very hot. We have understory trees. Some of them are productive, like this one right here is an Asian pear tree doing very, very well. And we also have herbaceous things down here underneath the overstories and understory, and then we have our ground cover, but we also have a forest floor that we've made out of wood chips. So we've had some local yard waste brought in, and the wood chips that they use that are normally sent to the landfill were then dumped on the ground, and we covered the grass and turned the grass into worm food, and over time that's going to create a layer of humus, of actual soil that we are manufacturing ourselves without having to bring in outside sources. Eventually, right now the wood chips obviously outside source, but local waste, so definitely doing some good with the environment there. But what you want to do is, once you get the soil manufacturing in your yard, then you can grow pretty much anything you need to as long as it likes fertile soil. If you want sandy soil, we've still got some places like down here that we keep because the HOA that we live in requires us to have at least a little bit of grass in our yard. We're trying to do this in a way that won't upset people, which I think is important. It's good to be a good neighbor. But what we're doing here is growing most of our food through means of polyculture boxes like this one. We have multiple varieties. So these are chicory, clover in between, because we always want to protect our soil. And then we've got some sorrel and a couple poppies popping up, but most of it's edible. We like everything to be either edible or have really nice flowers for beneficials. So as you move up here, we've got our kale bed. This is kale. We've got asters that bring in a lot of beneficials. The clover we're doing right now is crimson, but we're going to be switching to, we've already switched actually, like what's growing down here. This is a mini swale that I made on the hill here to trap water on the top, so that as water comes down and flows, it gets caught in this swale that we made, and then we covered it with wood chips. So there's actually a big dip underneath this where the water is going to go down and be captured into our water system in our yard. So it could be refilling the aquifers if we collect enough, but you know, with this little swale, I'm thinking that we're basically just going to be feeding what's in here, which is lemon trees and orange trees. We've got a Satsuma mandarin growing, and then the big pear here. The pear's got roots everywhere, so it's kind of hard to really plant too much stuff in terms of having big pots. So a lot of stuff we've been growing from seeds. Like for instance, we've got some okra growing up right here this season. This is clover. Down here for ground cover, there's brassicas growing. These are, I believe that's tree collards that we've got coming up. It's either tree collards or dinosaur kale. I forget which one. I think that's actually dinosaur kale. But there's also some shiso, and that's New Zealand spinach coming up. But yeah, lots of little things this year we're planting in addition to what we've already had growing the past couple years. We've been working on this a while, but this permaculture principle is really just set in the past couple years, and we've been taking off in terms of vermiculture, which is getting our own worms going and using our food waste to put in and feed the worms in the worm garden. And also composting, like this is our big composting pile that we've got going on now. We keep it covered to hold in the moisture, but this is just basically leaf litter, and we do put in, we need nitrogen, so we put in some coffee grounds, you know, until we get our forest going. Well, this year should be the year where we get it going where we can be completely closed loop and be sustainable. So we're real excited about that. But up until now, we've been using a lot of straw, and we've been getting some coffee grounds from the coffee shops. But you know, this is basically what we call our little kitchen garden back here. We do have hydroponics. This is a tent that we set up for our squash plants, because the squash here get borers. We get borers so bad. The moths are just flying around everywhere, and little red dots all over our vines. Last year we ended up only getting 1 or 2 squashes, so we made the tent. But this used to be a fence going across here, and I left the posts up and just put wire across them and then extended our fence so we could have a little more of the growing space for our little kitchen garden. So lots of rosemary. We put like I said, the screen on the posts that were left over, so now we've got places for beans to grow. Lots of beneficials. We've got our hydroponic system. We utilize borders. In permaculture, borders are very important. So we utilize our borders by planting lots of beneficial flowers and herbs. Like for instance, this is feverfew right here. This is arugula. We've got some oxalis back here. More arugula. Bee balm, very awesome plant. Love bee balm. It grows another bee balm back here, different kinds of bee balm. And then we put mustard in between. This is basically, we put like all the plants that we have extras of, we'll just kind of put along the fence and our borders. Borders of everything though, like even we've got this bed going where we keep okra, and right now we're interplanting turnips until the okra get big enough. So once the okra get big, the turnips will be ready to pull out, and then at that point we've got spinach growing under here, so hopefully the canopy of the okra will keep the spinach cool in the heat. And then around the borders I've got a moringa here, and there's a couple turnips over there, some beets, and a couple peas here and there. So, you know, just trying to use all the space that we can to grow as much food as we can. Super important to have food in times like this. I think you guys will all agree. But we just put a lot of flowers everywhere, floral in the middle of our gardens, to kind of, like I said, replicate the structure of a forest where you have things that are tall that hold the light off of things that are on the ground during the heat of the summer. So this is a great one. This is what is this? Texas Star Hibiscus. The flowers on this get huge, as big as my hand. They're awesome. But the leaves aren't that good, and it does get some light through, so it still lets a lot of the things grow that we put underneath. So the way we do it is we let all the lettuce that we grow from the winter time basically flower out, and at the time where a lot of the smaller plants are coming up, they're going to be these will be flowering at the same time, which keeps the bugs around. So when these plants get big enough and they start flowering, hopefully some of the bugs will still be around, and there's like this cycle where you know, there's beneficials around year-round, which is really nice, or at least in the season when they're active. So take you guys over here and show you again using a tall tree that provides shade and planting underneath it things that you normally wouldn't actually be able to plant out in direct sunlight, like brassicas in the middle of heat. This is a wonderful brassica. So this is one of my favorites, actually. It is Siberian kale, and it is the best kale out of all the kales in my opinion, because it is just so soft in terms of the texture, and the flavor has a very sweet flavor, and you can eat the stems all the way down to the bottom, which is wonderful. So that is actually very, very crispy. It's not like the other ones that are real fibrous. And that's a good thing, to have the brassicas and be able to consume all that we grow in its entirety, but also give back, because we want to put at least 2/3 of what we're growing back into the soil to regenerate it, which is why we have these compost bins that we have right over here. This is our little nursery area. This used to be a chicken coop, but now it's our mushroom grow room, and I know you guys would love to see that. This is our rain barrel that we harvest the rain off of a metal roof, very important, so no sediment gets in there from the gasoline products off shingles. Our mushroom grow room, got a few, these are lion's mane coming up right now, and this is snow oysters, I believe, that we've got going. So some other lion's mane that are just getting started right now, but it'll be a little while. But this is kind of where I keep all the plants that I've been trying to propagate now that it's getting a little warmer, because I can't just leave them out. This is a chicken of the woods. People are really excited about this one because chicken of the woods hasn't been cultivated very many times and documented, and we have an actual shelf coming out right here, which is going to be very important, but it stopped about a week ago, so stopped growing in mass. So it will be interesting to see how that turns out if we keep moisture on it and keep it growing. But as we come out, you can see the compost pile. What I did was, we used this one to fill while this one's sitting in the summertime, and what we do is we put plants on the top of it to kind of get an idea of when it's going to be ready. And so far, this has actually been our most productive area. It's great, like growing around on top of the compost pile, things like squash love compost. So this is we put horse manure in it, and the squash plants are just going crazy over this. It's wonderful. in comparison to the growth of the other plants that we've had. These are eggplants as well. This is early eggplants, so hopefully they'll be ready in the next couple weeks. Got some logs that we're preparing to inoculate here. Our worm bed is over here. So we put vegetation in our worm bed, keep our worms happy. We also put eggshells, pretty much anything out of the kitchen that's a scrap. So if we're eating it and it's not a meat, because meat will, animal products, animal meat, bones, things like that will attract flies and smell, and we're trying to keep those down. If you just put vegetation in compost and put carbon on top of it, or when you're doing a worm bed, you don't have to worry about the smell, so you don't upset your neighbors as much. But this year I'm really excited about these vines. We've had grapevines for about 15 years. But the vines this year, we decided to run wire from tree to tree, and just instead of having like one little trellis area, and that's how we incorporated the compost piles. So, but now we've got it so that we can run wires and have the grapevine go all over our whole backyard from tree to tree. So very excited about that this year. We're going to start and just basically have it go around the whole yard, because it's at the age where it'll just go and take off at this point if we don't cut it. And those are Suburban grapes, by the way. One of the treats of the South. Now, once you come out of the gate on this side, in between our neighbors over here, we've got, this is the shady spot, and that's where we've got our inoculated logs. That's the little plugs that you're seeing on here are the inoculation points, where we had wooden dials and we just hammered them in and then covered them with wax. And the dials were inoculated already when we purchased them offline, but I've recently started doing all that myself. So now that we've got the cultures in our fridge, we can just take the cultures and stick in a jar of dials ourselves, and after we sterilize the dials, of course, and then we can culture our own dials for inoculating logs. So that's completely self-sustained at that point. You just have to know the sterilization procedures. So the front yard is where most of our shade happens here. So we've got our pawpaws. Permaculture has kind of staple trees that you do, and the pawpaw is kind of a symbol of permaculture, I think, along with a couple other ones like the mulberries. The mulberries are another one, and that's what I've got right down here. And fig trees everywhere, because figs in the South they're just so prolific. They grow so well. But we've got little boxes that we've put, and then put a couple different medicinal herbs, and until the medicinal herbs get bigger, like there's wallflower and a couple other ones in here. I think Holyopsis is the one that's over here. But these couple Brassicas in here, these Brassicas that are growing are going to be our food, while the rest of this is going to come up. So we're always trying to keep things going, keep a cycle going as much as possible. And we do get people, dogs and things and rabbits, so I caged a couple of the mulberries, because I don't want those. Those are like my prize. I really, really want mulberries in my yard. So we've got a couple apple trees that we put in the front, mulberries on the back, and that's in both of these boxes. Fig trees up here, pawpaw trees here. This area is going to be a walkway, so wood chips here probably in the next year. Pineapple sage, an amazing plant. If you haven't looked that up, I have one from last year, and then I propagated it over the winter, and now I've got like 50 of them. So just that one plant that was only about this big, I was able to put in the hydroponic system and propagate it consistently over the winter, and now they're everywhere. We've been giving them to friends and family. They make great teas. So nasturtiums are another one, and what we did was we put clover everywhere so that the pollinators will come. Pollinators are great in terms of just getting our vegetables. We won't be able to get our vegetables unless the bees and everything come to pollinate it. We could hand pollinate, but we're out here, we don't want to be spending a whole lot of time. The whole point of permaculture is that we don't want to spend a lot of time doing it. We want it permanently there, so that we can just go and get our food whenever we need it with very little input. And that's the goal. And right now this isn't there yet, so this still has a couple years before we can get there, but we are working, and we have the system, we understand it, and it's basically just a forest. So if you can walk into a forest and you can understand how that system works, or just observe it for a while, if you just sit in the woods and just look around, a lot of times things will just click and be like, I didn't think of that. So, and that's where we're at right now. So thank you so much.